November 1942. The western bank of the Volga River. Temperature, -18 degrees Celsius. Vasily Zaitsev is lying motionless in the rubble of the Barrikady factory complex. He has been there for 4 hours. He controls his breathing. He does not move. Across several hundred meters of frozen no man's land, a German officer has been using a periscope scope, a device mounted above the trench line, to direct mortar fire. He has done this for days. The casualties from that directed fire are mounting. Zaitsev has one shot. He cannot move after taking it. German counter-snipers are waiting for a muzzle flash. His spotter is behind a separate pile of rubble, unable to signal without exposing himself. Zaitsev squeezes the trigger. The periscope shatters. The German officer drops. Zaitsev does not move for another 2 hours. Here is what the historical record complicates. The rifle Zaitsev used throughout the Battle of Stalingrad, the specific Mosin-Nagant, he had recalibrated and refined across more than 200 confirmed kills, was removed from his hands by Red Army Command in December 1942 and sent to Moscow. He never used that particular rifle again. The question is not whether the order was unusual. The question is what it tells us about what that rifle and the man who carried it had become. By autumn 1942, Soviet sniping doctrine was considered effective but structurally limited. The theory was sound. Precision fire suppresses enemy movement, creates psychological pressure, and eliminates command personnel. The problem was scale and consistency. Before the Stalingrad campaign, Soviet sniper schools graduated candidates after a standardized 6-week program. The curriculum emphasized marksmanship fundamentals, breathing control, trigger discipline, range estimation, but gave minimal instruction in fieldcraft, how to build a hide, how to move without disturbing vegetation, how to read wind across distance. Red Army internal reviews from 1942 found that the average Soviet sniper achieved relatively few confirmed kills before being killed, wounded, or neutralized by enemy counter-sniper operations. A significant percentage were eliminated within their first 2 days of deployment. The German Wehrmacht had invested in sniper training since 1939. Their Sharfschützen program ran 12 weeks minimum, with a dedicated counter-sniper curriculum that specifically trained hunters to locate and eliminate enemy precision shooters before those shooters could establish effectiveness. General Vasily Chuikov, commanding the 62nd Army at Stalingrad, understood this asymmetry. His solution was to create what he called a sniper movement, a decentralized network of precision shooters embedded across every sector. But he acknowledged in his own memoirs that early results were insufficient. The institutional consensus in late 1942 was that closing the capability gap would take another 18 months through expanded school programs. 18 months was not available. Stalingrad was being fought in weeks. What nobody in the training command had modeled was what would happen if a single sniper could compress that timeline into 6 weeks. Not through a program, but through direct transmission. One man teaching 10 men, who each taught 10 more, in the field, under fire, using a specific rifle tuned to a specific method. Vasily Grigorievich Zaitsev was born on March 23, 1915, in Yeleninskoye, a village in the Chelyabinsk Oblast of the southern Ural Mountains. His grandfather taught him to hunt at an early age, not as recreation, but as subsistence. The family's winter food supply depended on it. This is the detail that explains everything that followed. Zaitsev learned to read terrain before he learned to read text. By adolescence, he was tracking deer across frozen ground, reading compression patterns in snow to determine how old a track was and which direction the animal had moved. He could estimate distance across open mountain terrain with an accuracy his grandfather found unusual. He joined the Soviet Navy in 1936, serving in the Pacific Fleet, initially as a clerk in the finance department. His marksmanship scores during basic training were noted in his file. No one acted on them. He was a clerk. He remained a clerk until the German invasion. He requested infantry transfer and arrived at Stalingrad in September 1942 with the 284th Rifle Division as a private with no formal sniper training. In his first 10 days of combat, using a standard-issue Mosin-Nagant rifle, he recorded 32 confirmed kills. What he was doing that other soldiers were not. He was hunting. He was reading the battlefield the way he had read the Ural Mountains, as terrain with predictable patterns, sight lines, and choke points. Enemy soldiers, like animals, repeated behaviors. They used the same paths. They emerged at the same times. He was not a miraculous marksman. He was a tracker who could also shoot. By October 1942, Zaitsev had accumulated over 80 confirmed kills. General Chuikov ordered him to train other snipers, not in a school, but in the field. Zaitsev's method was not a formal curriculum. It was a transmission of instinct made systematic. He identified 3 things that standard training ignored. First, German snipers and observers were creatures of habit. They used the same positions across multiple days because those positions were good cover, sight lines, withdrawal routes. You did not find them by searching. You found them by waiting for the moment their discipline broke. Second, a rifle's zero. The calibrated relationship between sight and barrel at a specific distance was not a fixed factory setting. It was a living calculation that changed with temperature, humidity, and the characteristics of individual ammunition batches. In Stalingrad's winter conditions, an uncalibrated rifle introduced consistent error at practical engagement distances. Third, most snipers were trained to find the best available position. Zaitsev taught that the best position you could identify was also the best position the enemy expected you to occupy. He trained his students to use the second best position, slightly worse sight lines, no logical reason to be there. The 62nd Army's training department reviewed his informal results. His first group of 10 students averaged impressive kill counts within 30 days, but raised institutional objections. Standardized training produced auditable, predictable results. Zaitsev's method might produce nothing in a different environment. Chuikov authorized a limited expansion regardless. 30 additional students, 60 days, observed results. If you've made it this far, the story gets considerably darker from here. Subscribe now so you don't lose the thread. The expansion nearly ended before it began. In November 1942, a German counter-sniper operation wounded 2 of Zaitsev's senior students and forced the entire operation to relocate twice in 1 week. For 8 days, training stopped completely. Zaitsev spent those days hunting the German counter-sniper. Soviet accounts, recorded in Zaitsev's own 1956 memoir Notes of a Sniper, describe a multi-day positional duel with a German sniper he identified as an instructor from a Wehrmacht sniper school. According to his account, he used a helmet raised on a stick to draw fire, located the muzzle flash, and killed the shooter the following morning at approximately 300 meters. The ruse itself echoed a technique his grandfather had used to draw a fox from cover. Here the historical record requires a caveat. No German military documents confirm the identity of this individual, or that any specific counter-sniper was dispatched to Stalingrad to eliminate Zaitsev. Historians, including Antony Beevor, have expressed skepticism about the duel as described. The account comes from Zaitsev's memoirs and Soviet wartime records and must be understood in that context. What is documented is this: training resumed, and the results that followed were not in dispute. December 1942. Sector: the Krasny Octiabber factory complex, northwestern Stalingrad. A German reinforcement column had been using a sheltered approach route through the factory district. A gap between two collapsed structures, one of the only vehicle-passable routes in the sector. Zaitsev's student group, called the Zaichata, the Hares, a reference to his hunting background, had been observing this route for days. They had mapped German sniper positions covering the approach, identified windows in German observation, and calculated engagement distances across multiple positions along the route. When the German column entered the approach, the Zaichata fired in a coordinated sequence. Multiple soldiers were killed. Both vehicles were disabled. The operation lasted under 2 minutes. No Soviet sniper was wounded. The German Sixth Army's internal communications from December 1942, recovered after the Soviet victory at Stalingrad, referenced the problem explicitly. One memo stated that movement in the Krasny Octiabber sector had become practically impossible during daylight hours due to precision fire from an unknown number of expert marksmen. The number was not unknown. It was a group of trained snipers, the majority of whom had been soldiers of any kind for less than 4 months. Stalingrad coverage continues on this channel. The subscribe button keeps you in the thread. Red Army records from this period indicate a significant improvement in sniper effectiveness following the formalization of Zaitsev's approach. Soviet sniper casualties in units using his methods fell sharply compared to units using standard doctrine. The exact figures vary across sources and should be treated as approximations, but the directional shift is not disputed. One of Zaitsev's students, Tanya Chernova, had been a field nurse before he trained her. She is credited with approximately 80 confirmed kills during her service at Stalingrad. She was wounded in early 1943 and evacuated, ending her combat service. Vasily Zaitsev survived the war. He was blinded by a mortar fragment in January 1943. The same month, the German Sixth Army's encirclement at Stalingrad became irreversible and spent months in a Moscow hospital, where the ophthalmologist Vladimir Filatov restored vision in both eyes. He returned to combat, but his role had already changed. Between October 10 and December 17, 1942, he had recorded 225 confirmed kills at Stalingrad alone. His total wartime count reached 242. He was named a hero of the Soviet Union on February 22, 1943. His methods were formalized into a new Red Army training doctrine, distributed across sniper schools from mid-1943 onward. Over 428,000 Soviet soldiers received some version of sniper training before the war ended. The rifle he had used through the battle, the recalibrated Mosin-Nagant that had accounted for a significant portion of those 225 kills, was sent to Moscow in December 1942. It is preserved today at the Central Museum of the Great Patriotic War at Poklonnaya Gora. You can see it. Here is the fact that changes the shape of this story. The Soviet Union's official sniper training manual, issued in 1943 and used through the end of the war, was written in large part from notes taken by Zaitsev's own students, not by Zaitsev himself, who had no formal military education and had never written a training document in his life. The most effective sniper program in the Second World War was built by a man who was, on paper, a naval finance clerk. His rifle is in a glass case in Moscow. His methods are in every modern precision shooting curriculum that followed.